Hello and welcome to another webinar in our leadership series. Today's topic is data analytics for leaders. My name is Dr. Donald Chick and I'm President and CEO of New Synergist Consulting. We provide leadership development, business strategy, diversity, equity, and inclusion services, along with coaching and data analytics. And our motto is, we see you. In today's webinar, we're going to discuss three main areas of data analytics. First, we're going to provide an introduction and discuss some of the definitions that you might be hearing. Then we're going to examine the state of the industry regarding data analytics. And finally, we're going to talk about all of the things you should be doing in your organization as you lead it in the area of data analytics. Let's first start with a couple definitions. Data analytics. Data, when suitably filtered and analyzed along with other data and a suitable analytics applied, can provide valuable information to sources such as organizations, industries, business, medicine, health, disaster management, and a whole variety of other topics in the form of predictions, recommendations, or decisions. Another term one might hear is business analytics, and this is the data associated with an analytics problem from social networks, relevant databases, spreadsheets, or other sources of information. These data are identified, gathered, and organized. The data is then subjected to analysis using available analytics tools and techniques. The tools and techniques can be statistical models, machine learning concepts, or other analytics tools. The tools and techniques involved are for descriptive analytics, predictive analytics, discovery analytics, which are also called diagnostic analytics, or prescriptive analytics. And these analytics are for generating the statistics and other information that can lead eventually to relevant solutions or recommendations. Business analytics involves business planning, making business insights, arriving at solutions for business problems using the information and statistics from relevant or associated data sources by applying the different tools and techniques that we've discussed. So when you look at this pictorial, basically we take data, use tools and techniques to analyze, sort, separate different business or other types of data. And from that, we gain business insight that we can use to address problems, make decisions, or at least with that insight, have recommendations for how to proceed. Let's dig into the four types of analytics that we will be addressing. The first type are called descriptive analytics. And basically that means we're asking, what happened? We want to describe or summarize existing data using existing business intelligence tools to better understand what is going on or what has happened. What has happened in the past. And we need to be careful about how we use all analytics. In this area of descriptive analytics, we are talking about things that already happened. So you might use these in a status meeting or for status reports to find out what happened yesterday. And this is the lowest level, so to speak, of analytics. And as we talk about the next three, after we wrap up this one, we'll talk about some of those tools that can get even more information and thus generate more powerful support for decisions. Some people use terms such as advanced analytics or business intelligence, and typically It's simply the use of descriptive statistics on existing data. It is said that about 80% of business analytics mainly involves descriptions based on aggregations of past performance. It's an important step to make raw data understandable to investors, shareholders, managers, and others. This way, it gets easy to identify and address areas of strengths or weaknesses in order to support strategy and decision making. The two main techniques involved are data aggregation and data mining. And it's purely used for understanding the underlying behavior and not to make any estimations. We need to understand that this level of analytics is the lowest or the simplest level. It's important, but there are much more powerful topics and tools and techniques that we can use to make our data analytics better and even more powerful in terms of making decisions and creating strategies for tomorrow. Diagnostic analytics is used to determine why something happened in the past. It is characterized by techniques such as drill down, data discovery, data mining, and correlations. Diagnostic analytics takes a deeper look at data to understand the root causes of the events. It is helpful in determining what factors and events contributed to the outcome. It mostly uses probabilities, likelihoods, and the distribution of outcomes for the analysis. In a time series data of sales, diagnostic analytics would help you understand why the sales have decreased or increased for a specific year or so. However, this type of analytics has a limited ability to give actionable insights. It simply provides an understanding of the causal relationships and sequences while looking backwards, while looking at yesterday or last week or last year. A few techniques that uses diagnostic analytics include attribute importance, principal components analysis, sensitivity analysis, and conjoint analysis. Training algorithms for classification and regression also fall into this type of analytics. Other uses of this type of analytics might be to look back at construction projects or public works projects. What happened yesterday? How much did we do yesterday compared to what we're doing right now? But again, as in that first phase of descriptive analytics that we've talked about, this is mostly looking backwards. So we started with making sure the information is provided in such a way that we can analyze it, the data. And then in this form that we just completed, we're looking at how we can actually do more analysis using statistical tools and techniques. And again, this is mostly based on data that we already have. In the next two forms of analytics we'll talk about, we will start to look at tomorrow. What's likely to happen? What do we predict is going to happen? That way we can get ahead of the game and hopefully make decisions that prepare us for things that are going to happen in the future. The first phase of this is called predictive analytics. What is most likely to happen? Emphasis is on predicting the possible outcome or outcomes using statistical models and machine learning techniques. Predictive analytics is used to produce future outcomes, but it's important to note that it cannot predict if an event will occur in the future. It merely forecasts the probabilities of the occurrence of an event. A predictive model builds on the preliminary descriptive analytics stage to derive the possibility of outcomes. The essence of predictive analytics is to devise models such that the existing data is understood to extrapolate the future occurrence or simply predict the future data. Hence, predictive analytics involves building and validating models that provide accurate predictions. Predictive analytics rely on machine learning algorithms like random forest, SVM, etc., and statistics for learning and testing the data. Usually, organizations need trained data scientists and machine learning experts for building these models. The most popular tools for predictive analytics include Python, R, and RapidMiner. The prediction of future data relies on the existing data as it cannot be obtained otherwise. If the model is properly tuned, it can be used to support complex forecasts in sales and marketing. It goes a step ahead of the standard business intelligence in terms of giving accurate predictions. So even though we described descriptive and diagnostic analytics as looking at the past, I don't want to downplay their importance. As you are starting to see, hopefully, that is the basis for being able to use the predictive analytics that we just discussed and prescriptive analytics that we'll discuss in just a moment. While predictive analytics helps us to determine what is likely to happen in the future, prescriptive analytics allows us to create recommendations for actions that can be taken to affect potential outcomes. A type of predictive analytics that is used to recommend one or more courses of action in terms of the data analysis. So the basis of this analytics is predictive analytics, but it goes beyond the three mentioned above: descriptive, diagnostic, and predictive, to suggest future solutions. It can also suggest all favorable outcomes according to a specified course of action and suggest various courses of actions to get a particular outcome. Hence, it uses a strong feedback system that constantly learns and updates the relationship between the action and the outcome. Computations include optimization of some functions that are related to the desired outcome. For example, if you're calling for a cab or an Uber, the application uses GPS to connect you to the correct driver from among a number of drivers found nearby. Hence, it optimizes the distance for faster arrival time. Recommendation engines also use prescriptive analytics, and recommendation engines might include services like Yelp, for instance, that can help recommend the best restaurant for you based on your preferences. The other approach includes simulation, where all the key performance areas are combined to design correct solutions. It makes sure that the key performance metrics are included in the solution. The optimization model will further work on the impact of the previously made forecasts. So they get better and better. You use a forecast, you feed the machine some data that tells it how close the forecast was previously, and it allows this type of analytics to make adjustments which can make those future forecasts even better. Because of its power to suggest favorable solutions, prescriptive analytics is the final frontier of advanced analytics or data science. So, to summarize our discussion of descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive analytics, let's talk about value and sophistication. As we move from descriptive to prescriptive, we are adding value. Value in terms of the benefits that can be derived from analytics. We're also adding sophistication in terms of how sophisticated, how much more benefit can be derived because of this sophistication. So we can divide these 4 levels of analytics into 2 areas. One is hindsight. So that's what descriptive and diagnostic analytics are. We're looking at what happened and why it happened. Most of us already have tools that provide some level of descriptive analytics. In many cases, we might simply call them metrics. These are important because we want to make sure, based on our business acumen, that we understand our business well enough to understand what types of metrics we should be tracking. If we have the right metrics, then we can certainly utilize analytics to make sure we understand what happened and why it happened. Once we've accomplished those 2 levels of sophistication in terms of analytics, we can now move to what we might call foresight, or understanding what is likely to happen in the future and what we should be doing about it based on our goals, our vision for our organization. So in these 2 areas, predictive and prescriptive, we want to know first what could happen or what's likely to happen, and then secondly, based on that likelihood of what will happen in the future, we want to understand what we should be doing now, so we can take advantage of that knowledge about the likely future so we can make the appropriate decisions. So it's important to use all 4 types of analytics, and in most cases you really need to use analytics which look at the past in order to prepare your organization for utilizing analytics that look at what's likely to happen tomorrow and then support strategy and decisions for dealing with that likely future. During the remaining part of this webinar, we'll be discussing this final frontier, how you can get there. What are some of the concerns and issues that you'll be looking at and need to be aware of in order to make sure you don't stumble along the way? But even though this is the final frontier, as you will see, we need to use all 4 levels of analytics in order to get to this 4th and final level or final frontier, as we'll be discussing, in order to be successful. If you aren't sure about technological advancement, I'd like you to take a look at this chart and see how the human intuitive perspective of technological advancement will expand or explode in the next 10 years. Basically, the prediction is an increase in current technology of 1,000 times. In other words, in 10 years, we could be 1,000 times more advanced than we are today. So let's take a look at some applications of business analytics. One is personalized marketing. And if you use the internet, whether you know it or not, you have seen this type of marketing. If you browse in a particular area, you will begin to see ads of some sort related to that area. So for instance, you've decided to take up badminton. So you start to go to sites to look and see what equipment is needed, maybe lessons or some other thing, and all of a sudden you'll see advertisements for badminton. Or if you look up certain types of plays or movies or sporting events or types of food, lawnmowers, whatever the case may be. Another area is mobile advertising. And in mobile advertising, these folks want to understand your shopping history. Again, so they can personalize that marketing to you. They want to know where you are at any given time, so they'll know if you're in a certain area of town, they can recommend grocery stores or restaurants or movie theaters. Again, based on your search habits. So if you haven't already thought about it, Big Brother literally is watching you. Now, with certain mobile devices, depending on the brands you use, some are better than others in terms of allowing you to turn off some of this tracking. But just be aware, if you do something in the digital world, you are likely being tracked unless you have taken steps to eliminate that tracking. And it's almost impossible to totally eliminate it. There's also a large amount of work being done in terms of genomic data, looking at our DNA or our RNA, looking at how to use this information that we can gather from individuals or groups of individuals in order to create better health profiles. The positive about this is we can create more personalized treatment, medicines that are more precise. In other words, they can target a specific area of our body without impacting, especially in a negative way, other parts of our body. Again, with all of these, there is some concern, and there should be, about privacy, about how this data will be used, about whether or not we should even be doing it. So you'll hear a lot more about this as we move forward with likely 1,000 times more advancement as compared to today in only about 10 years. Another area that surrounds us is what's called smart data analytics, sensor networks of all types. Just when you think about the modern automobile, for instance, an automobile can easily have over 100 different sensors. Then you think of smart cities with cameras, with other devices that track foot traffic as well as automobile, bus, or truck traffic, that can actually monitor stoplights to make them hold the red light longer or shorter periods to keep traffic moving. Smart homes. You can now outfit your home, if you like, with devices that'll manage your HVAC systems, that'll turn lights on or off, that will start up your washing machine or dryer at certain times of day in order to reduce your electric consumption to times of day where there's less load on the systems. In some cities, utilities have already installed meters that allow the utility to actually reduce your consumption at certain parts of the day in order to eliminate overloads. Security systems to eliminate theft or to manage or support police departments so they can be in the right place at the right time, not only to reduce thefts, but maybe to reduce things like homicides or other crimes that may be committed. We talked about energy conservation, we talked about traffic control. Those are areas that are very important and are already being used in terms of smart data analytics, and their use is only increasing and the analytics are only getting better. On-demand services are spreading as well, and using smart technologies, you can make these on-demand services support homes, buildings, and other smart environments. So for instance, the typical hotel today allows you to check in at some point around noon and check out at some point around 11 or 12 the next day. With on-demand services, you might be able to check in anytime you want based on availability. And the charge you'll have will be determined by when you check out. So then you have round-the-clock services. I know at various times, maybe because of when I traveled, I wanted to check into a hotel at 8 in the morning. But I was going to leave that night, maybe by 8 or 7. But there was no way to do that without being charged for maybe 2 nights in some cases, depending on when you had to be there. They're also talking about automobiles and how much time your automobile typically sits, but you're paying for it, whether you're leasing or buying. And maybe if you could have on-demand automobiles, you would only pay for the time you're using it. So you wouldn't be owning it. It'd be similar to a timeshare. Industries of all types, different countries around the world are using these on-demand services or starting to think about them so they can reduce not only the impact on the environment, but the cost to others and the need for having as many of everything that we might have now. So somebody somewhere is likely looking at just about every industry you can think of and asking, how can we create better on-demand services? When we start to discuss this explosion of technology, we can't avoid discussing big data analytics. Just imagine at Google, more than 95% of their revenues come from advertising using big data. That amounts to more than $32 billion a year. Now there are a multitude of areas where you can use big data, and a lot of organizations are already starting to do that. One of those areas, for instance, is product development. How do you make innovative designs based on demand, or what might even be called just in time? In manufacturing, finding problems that can come up in the machines which will affect the quality of the product. So when should we provide maintenance for a particular machine before we see a degradation of quality? HVAC systems. How often should we perform preventive maintenance? Are we performing it too much or just enough so it doesn't break? Distribution. Enhancing supply and increasing inventories based on demand, such as weather, such as holidays, such as the economy, etc. How do you determine when people are going to demand a particular type of product? Now, we're already using some of that. We know when springtime comes, we're likely or more likely to go to Home Depot to buy plants, for instance. But we can go much further and much deeper with distribution than that. Marketing, understanding customer behaviors for personalized marketing. And that's why certain platforms like Facebook do so well. Many of us spend so much time on Facebook and share so much data about ourselves, about our families and friends, that this marketing has become so much more important and has supported the growth of Facebook, frankly, so they can do more for their customers in terms of understanding customer behaviors or the behaviors of likely customers. And price management, managing prices based on related conditions. Now, we already mentioned these smart meters that are already in many homes in America and in other places around the world that can help utility companies determine how to price electricity for certain times of the day based on the usage again. And if you're willing to shift your usage, you can save some money. And this price management also allows them, the electric company, to manage their distribution, to balance their loads. So big data analytics is here and is here to stay. And just some other examples. When you think of networks, demographic data, banks, data from online shopping, public-private organizations, log files from wireless telephone companies, satellites, sensors of all types, networks, that is a lot of data. Some examples: tweets from Twitter, more than 700 million every day. Facebook, just photos, 4,000 photos uploaded every second. Walmart, more than 1 million customer transactions per hour. So there's a lot of data there. And those who will be able to take all of that data and analyze it in a way that makes it useful in supporting decision making, in supporting strategy, in predicting what is needed for the future, are those organizations that are likely to be out ahead of everyone else and thus be more profitable, more productive, and more successful. So, with everything we've discussed in this brief introduction of data analytics, what are some things that we should also know and be prepared to deal with? Well, the first is to understand that about 47% of organizations have near-term data analytics initiatives of some sort. Data-driven companies are 23 times more likely to outperform competitors in acquiring new users of their products and services. They're 19 times more likely to achieve above average or better profitability. And they're 15 times more likely to deliver better value to their customers. So think about the success level of data-driven companies. They're outperformers in their industries. They're likely to achieve above average profitability, and they deliver better value to their customers, which means they're more likely to retain customers and attract new ones. Now here's where the problems start. 2/3 of companies studied failed to meet the objectives they stated in terms of their data analytics processes. One of the concerns, or one of the outcomes of this, was after the fact, they came to the conclusion that major innovations with analytics was much harder than they expected. So we need to make sure we understand how to prepare for our data analytics initiatives and how to make sure, or at least minimize, the possibility of failure. So some of the steps that need to be taken in order to make sure your analytics strategy is successful. And the first is you need clean data. Data that's easily accessible, data that has one view, and that view is the truth in your organization. So in other words, you may have all types of data spread all over the place. Somehow it needs to be cleaned so it's consistent. So when I want to ask my analytics tools to look up a certain answer, I can get that as I move that data through that tool. As my data scientists start to write algorithms in order to make that data actionable. Proactive use. As leaders, we need to proactively recommend strategy for use of our analytics, for making decisions, and not spending a bunch of time gathering and managing and massaging analytics and then ignoring it because we don't like the answer. If we don't like the answer, we need to figure out, did we make some assumptions that were not accurate and we need to change those? Or maybe maybe we're not making the right decision or don't have the right answer. Centers of excellence. How are we sharing information among the different activities in our organization? Are we cooperating? Are we working together? Are we gathering information that maybe separately only provides a little bit of understanding? But if we could aggregate that together in terms of the outcomes we want for our larger organization, we'd have much better information. We would be able to make much better decisions. We would have much better tools at our disposal in terms of solutions to problems. Another need is standards. We need to have best practices in terms of the way we're going to use these tools and techniques that everyone has to follow. And if there's a reason that someone doesn't like the standard or doesn't think we should be following that, we need to perform some of the work that is needed to figure out what those standards should be. And then finally, this corporate strategy should be centered around understanding the basics of data analytics and making sure analytic solutions are easily accessible and usable by everyone who could benefit from it in our organization. It shouldn't be tucked away on some computer where only the data scientists have that information and know how to access it and how to use it. Everybody that needs this data, that needs this information, should be able to easily access it, easily understand it, and thus be able to make the appropriate decisions. Now, when you look at the opposite of this need for a good corporate strategy, here's what can be seen at many organizations that are not successful at using data analytics. First, they have bad data. It's in multiple locations, it's difficult to access, and it's not even accurate. At best, it's inconsistent. Your tools can't do much with that type of data. You'll get all types of conflicting answers and solutions that just aren't actionable. Reactive use. We'll use it sometimes if we have certain types of questions on an ad hoc basis so we can potentially answer those questions, but not routinely. Only when we want to, for whatever reason. And it may be because someone's advocating a particular solution. So let me go to the analytics to figure out what that tool says, and then I can justify my decision based on that. Analytic silos. Teams are not aware of the work others are doing. So ask yourself, how much do your folks know, not just the folks in the, I'll call it the analytic department, but folks around your organization know about the work you're doing if you're on one of those, in one of those silos. They likely have some answers that you need in order to do a better job at massaging and analyzing the data so you can provide them, your clients, with solutions that make them better at doing their job at making decisions about their particular area of expertise. A lot of these organizations don't have standards, as we talked about earlier. They're using multiple tools and techniques, and it literally can make cooperation impossible. The tools don't talk to each other, they aren't set up the same, the standards are different, they just won't work. So we need to make sure the standards are there. And then finally, it's just too complicated. The average person who doesn't want to be an analytics expert doesn't even know how to use the systems to pull data out, to get the right information to support decision making, to support the vision of the organization, to make the organization more profitable, more productive. So we need to make sure it's as simple as possible. Just pushing one or two buttons, or having an automatic information pop up in the form of a dashboard or dashboards of some sort. So let's talk about a roadmap for success. What should you be doing as a leader in your organization to make sure analytics are available to support the strategies that you believe will make your organization more successful, or analytics that will confirm that your strategy is appropriate for the goals and objectives that you have in mind? The first milestone you need to address is C-suite training. For the very senior leaders in every part of your organization, they need to be provided with an overview of analytics. What is possible and what is not possible. Also, what are the strengths and weaknesses of the different approaches? This will allow you to figure out how much money you need to spend. What type of people, in terms of data scientists or data analysis experts, do you need to hire in order to perform this mission, to make this part of your products and services, or maybe even part of your overhead, however you decide to do it, so you can make sure the analytics strategy you choose makes for success and not for failure. Milestone 2 is manager training. This is more in-depth than that C-suite training that we just talked about, and is provided all the way down to frontline managers and supervisors. The training is similar, but will include more hands-on usage. Now, I prefer making sure you have dashboards that you can change or modify for different levels. But as you get down to lower levels of the organization, in terms of your managers and supervisors, they need to have a little bit more hands-on training so they can do some of those analytics tasks themselves, and then only push off to your maybe centralized analytics team those types of issues like programming in Python or R that probably doesn't need to be pushed down to your frontline supervisors. Milestone 3 is assessment. Don't reinvent the wheel. Make sure you understand your current level of tools and talent, and that you're making appropriate use of what already exists in your organization. Now, obviously, where there are gaps, that's where you're going to make some hiring decisions or change the organization in some manner that supports success in the future based on this assessment. Milestone 4 is to look at quick wins. Start with a lot of small projects. Determine what will work, and then make sure you communicate that success to your organization. So you start to create this groundswell where people aren't resisting, avoiding, or ignoring analytics, but where they're actually asking for more. If it does this well, I want more of that. That's what you want, and that's what you can get with these quick wins. And then based on all of that, you want to then tweak or modify your strategy so you can maximize the probability of successful transformation. You've had the training, you've communicated what you want to do, you have a good assessment of your organization, you have some small, maybe we'll call it pilot projects where you can generate some quick wins or quickly toss out those things that for whatever reason don't seem to be working. And now you can develop a full-blown organizational strategy that allows you to create transformative processes based on the analytics that you can provide to your entire team. So some final thoughts. 3 things that you ought to consider in terms of how you're going to make sure this data analytics transformation is successful. 1, we want to make sure data is accessible, is usable, is manageable by all appropriate parties. There's no reason in most cases to keep this data tucked away where only a few people can access it or understand it. So make sure you have things like dashboards that can easily be accessible by any employee in your organization that can benefit by having that information. 2, treat your data as a product with a return on investment. Understand how much money you're spending and time you're spending on creating this product, and then figure out the benefits that you're getting. How much is that return on investment? That typically will make it easier to make decisions around budgeting for and improving the analytics services you'll be providing. And then 3, take an agile approach to digital transformation using data analytics. Be available and ready to change or adjust course as necessary. Things are changing. Remember earlier we talked about technologies being 1,000 times more powerful in 10 years. So there's rapid change. So don't be too set in the way we have to do it, but be willing to move forward, understanding that there are some unknowns out there, but we're going to be ready and able to make adjustments as needed. So a couple more thoughts on those 3 areas we just introduced. Making data readily available. It's important to get data out of silos and into advanced analytics-based tools and into the hands of decision makers and in many cases external partners. To do this well often requires reconfiguring organizational processes to allow for rapid sharing of data, setting up data marketplaces, building technical infrastructure, making use of automation to identify, catalog, and manage data at scale, employing common querying and visualization tools across the enterprise to support and encourage widespread data use. Return on investment. Business leaders often view data as a raw material that supports analytics and decision making. Instead, Treat it as an internal product that you can package and distribute to groups across your enterprise and manage it that way. The owner of each data domain should serve as the data product manager with his or her performance tied to revenue, satisfaction, quality, and other similar measures, just like you would for any other product, internal or external to your organization. And then finally, again, have an agile approach to data transformation. High-performing organizations have typically adopted data culture practices more often than other respondents of these surveys. But even high performers have room to grow. While nearly 2/3 of respondents at high-performing companies say their companies report effectiveness at encouraging employees to use data for making daily decisions, only 13% say they are very effective. So if the high-performing companies are only 13% effective, how effective are the others? Well, they're already behind, and they're falling even further behind. So focus on evolving data cultures and competency. Ensure that new and existing hires are educated in the use of data and analytics by consistently communicating from the C-suite or the very top of your organization down to every level in your organization the importance of applying these tools on a daily basis. You cannot communicate too much. Finally, we want to look at everything we need to do as part of this data analytics initiative as a journey, a change management journey. So in order to do this, let's talk about a popular model, Kotter's 8-step change model, and look at the steps that we need to be taking as we move through this journey. The first one is to create a sense of urgency. We want to focus on opportunities that allow all employees to grow and learn for the benefit of the organization. Our leadership has to walk the talk. Anything less will signal to non-management employees that the initiative does not carry the weight or importance that we're trying to communicate. We also want to address the naysayers. In some cases, they are next to or completely impossible to get on board, but we want to eliminate or at least reduce their power. The next step is to figure out and create who that guiding coalition of leaders will be regarding this initiative. In many cases, they will have people with enough positional power and authority to address issues and make changes. And they have to be seen as having direct guidance and agreement with the leader of the organization, who should be intimately involved, at least in terms of communicating what's going on to employees, if not actually leading the effort. We want to develop a vision and strategy, and we've talked about this. What will the organization look like once we complete this journey, or at least make significant inroads down this path we're taking? We want to paint a picture of success with enough information, direction, and guidance so the guiding coalition can make decisions on the fly without having to seek permission at every turn. Once we've created our strategic vision and we've documented the initiatives that we want to pursue, we need to then start to communicate with the workforce so we can actually create a volunteer army of folks who can help us make this initiative, this strategic vision work. These are people who don't necessarily have positional power, but they have influence because they're subject matter experts, because they're motivated, because they're engaged, and they believe in this initiative, this strategic vision, and they want to be part of that team. Right behind that, though, is our ability to enable action by removing barriers. We need to make sure, especially in terms of managers, that there aren't managers as well as supervisors who are blocking movement into the future for whatever reason. And remember, in any change process, there will be resistance. So whether it's a manager or supervisor, whether it's policies or procedures or instructions or any other type of guidance that might be out there, we need to make sure we remove that as a barrier, if it is, in order to allow this volunteer army to continue to move forward. Next, we have to remember, in any fairly large or complex initiative, there will be a certain amount of despair or people who get uneasy when things don't seem to be moving as quickly as they thought it might be. So we need to generate short-term wins, even small ones, to send a message that we are making progress. We are moving forward. Things are getting better. We can literally see a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's getting brighter and larger as we move toward that light. Then we need to look at ways to sustain the acceleration, to make sure we don't get bogged down for any reason, whatever that might be. So we need to continually look for signs that things are slowing down or not working. And then we need to make adjustments as quickly as possible. And once we get to that point or close to the point of completing our mission, we need to figure out how to institute these changes to make sure we don't revert back to old habits or old ways of doing business for whatever reason. So we need to institute changes at that point. These might be organizational changes. This might be updated policy guidance, updated instructions, updated guidance on how we plan to do business moving forward. And then, of course, as always, we need to continually communicate to the workforce why things are working and what we need to continue to work on. As we wrap up this webinar, I hope you have a better understanding and appreciation for the power and the value of data analytics. Think of this process, if you choose to undertake it, as a journey from understanding what you should be measuring to understanding how to analyze it. From starting off with descriptive analytics, moving to diagnostic analytics, where you're looking at the past, and then into predictive analytics, where you're starting to predict what is likely to happen tomorrow, and then finally, at the highest levels, the most value of data analytics, you're looking at prescriptive analytics, where you're actually crafting strategy and making decisions on what is likely to happen based on your forecasts, because you have good data and good sound analytics that you're utilizing in a form that drives strategy and decisions. And part of making this happen is an understanding that you may have to change the culture of your organization. You may have to utilize change management processes that allow you to knock down barriers, provide people with better communication about your mission and vision, so you can gain their support in terms of making this change process work. Thank you very much again. I appreciate you, and as always, I see you.